Hi, I'm Andrew, and this is Bryce, one of our newer programmers here. We are obviously like very, very realm neutral, unbiased. You know, we do not in any way have a favorite realm that he and I are both going to be playing while we crush. Originally, when we talked about this during the Kickstarter, one of the goals that we laid out for our user interface was that we were going to be, building it out of the web. Our entire UI toolkit is a full copy of the Chromium browser, just dropped in and rendering snippets of web pages using HTML5 and JavaScript over the client. And there were a couple of reasons we did that. I mean, number one, just a huge amount of work has gone into optimizing the UI rendering in web browsers that we don't have to do ourselves. But the bigger one was that it opened it up to a lot of people in the community. There's no new language you have to learn how to create UI mods for our game. There's, it's just web pages, really. And, we hadn't really truly delivered on that goal over the last year, and that was basically a lack of manpower. But Bryce is
manpower.
Exactly. And he's done a lot of really good work that we're going to talk about here. But the first thing I do want to announce is that we really did want to make our UI moddable and hackable by everyone in the community. And towards that end, I want to announce that we are open sourcing it on GitHub. Just the whole thing, all the code, all the HTML, all the little icons and things bundled up, and that's going to be right there where you can download it. And we are using the Mozilla public license, which I want to talk a little bit about. It's one of the less common licenses. There are two extremes of the most popular common licenses. On one side, there's the Apache and BSD style licenses, which they let anyone take anything that you've done and repurpose it for whatever. Someone else could just take our whole UI code, turn it into a closed source program for themselves and not give anything back. On the other hand, there are licenses like the GPL that are extremely free to the point where they restrict your ability to not be free. And there are certain parts of our game engine, including things that we've licensed from other third parties that we can't release as open source. And so we needed a license for our UI code that wouldn't, propagate through and cause everything in our client and server to potentially also be open sourced, when we didn't even have the right to open source it. And the Mozilla public license, which is the license that all the Firefox code is under, strikes this really great middle ground because it affects the individual files of the UI without expanding out to affect other things in the project, like our renderer or our networking server or things like that. It has the same effect on the UI code that the GPL would, where if you make a change, you have to share it and continue to publish it, but it doesn't affect the rest of the game, and that's why it seemed like the right choice for us for our UI code. It's on GitHub right now. The URL is on our website, and check it out. Hack it to your heart's content, and hopefully you'll share some things back, but I'm very confident that Bryce has it in hand to finish the job, even if you don't. Next big UI announcement. I'm going to hand this over to Bryce a little bit, is that increasingly, and this is something that's really just going to affect the people who do want to hack on it, we've been using more and more TypeScript in our UI. And how do you like TypeScript, Bryce?
I like TypeScript a lot. I come from a C# background, and so TypeScript is kind of like JavaScript meets C#. So JavaScript, dynamically typed language, you just have variables that can be a number, it can be a string, it can be an object. The variable can literally be anything. And the nice thing about TypeScript is that variable can't be anything anymore. You actually have to give it an explicit type, so you have to say this variable is a number, this variable is a string. And the reason why that's nice is because it kind of holds your hand a little, and it makes things easier for you when you're programming. You'll make fewer mistakes by using TypeScript. So the other nice thing about TypeScript, though, is that it is still just vanilla JavaScript. If you don't want to write any TypeScript at all, you can just keep writing plain old JavaScript and it'll work perfectly fine. So I've been really enjoying TypeScript. It's it's just a nice change to have a compiler there behind my code as opposed to me potentially making mistakes that a compiler would catch for me.
And that one thing I really do want to emphasize, what Bryce said again, all TypeScript is already JavaScript. If you can write a program in JavaScript, you have already written a program in TypeScript. The only places where a JavaScript program isn't valid TypeScript is if that JavaScript was going to crash at runtime anyway. And that moves it moves it from why is my web page not working to, oh, here's an error in the code that gets highlighted in my editor before it ever runs. And it's really powerful that way. And I think one of the big benefits for especially when you have a project that's maintained by several people over many years, as MMOs tend to be, if they're lucky, there are advantages to dynamic languages in that you can throw stuff together really quickly, but as you get larger teams for larger timescales, having that static typing, it makes sure that
you're not making big mistakes. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you might not have known what the assumptions of the person who wrote the code you're calling into were. And this way, there's a compiler that saves you from being wrong about those assumptions.
If you use Visual Studio, it has the same IntelliSense support that C# has, so it's really nice too. As you're typing a function name, you get all the arguments and what the types of the arguments are, and that stuff can make your development actually fast as well. It helps, like I said, hold your hand a little bit and guide you down, using the right code that you intend to use. The nice thing though is, like, I come from a background of writing JavaScript for like 15 years now or something, and it has not been any different for me. If I want to write plain old JavaScript, I can. It doesn't interfere with any existing patterns or habits you already have with programming. It can just help clean up your code a little bit, basically, for you.
And next announcement, I'm going to turn this almost completely over to Bryce. If you're, again, this is one for the hackers out there,
underscore JS. So I'm a big fan of functional programming, especially when using JavaScript. It's a hybrid object-oriented functional language, except some of the functional features get hidden and buried in the language, and people don't tend to use them. Underscore is a really, really beautiful library. It's, I think, somewhere around 1,000 lines of code, so if you want to read through it, it doesn't take you that much time. And it basically gives you a bunch of helper utility functions, things that you would already be doing all the time, repeated throughout all of your JavaScript code. It'll clean up into a nice single function for you. My most common uses for it are things like underscore dot is string, underscore dot is function, underscore dot is number, simple functions that honestly should probably already exist in JavaScript and for whatever reason don't.
So with underscore JS, obviously we were using jQuery all along, and for a while I'd sort of I'd held the line on that and saying we don't want to use anything that's going to raise the burden of people in the community learning how to hack on our UI. And how easy is it going to be for someone to pick up underscore if they haven't used it before?
I think part of the beauty of it is you literally don't have to use it if you don't want to. It's going to clean up your code. If if you're repeating the same thing, like expression that says if the type of this variable is a string, you're repeating that code everywhere. You might as well just use underscore and use the one defined clean function for that. But the nice thing is you literally don't have to use it if you don't want to. But for what it's worth, the library is like 1,000 lines. It doesn't have that many functions in it. It's incredibly well documented on their website, and like by all means, you should probably use underscore in your JavaScript projects if you want to clean things up.
And it's not, say, a full framework that forces the structure of your entire program the way some things are. So
no, not in the slightest. It's basically a library with a bunch of helper functions. Like I said, things that you are already doing in JavaScript. It'll just help clean them up for you.
And so, that again, our use of that is right there on GitHub if you want to check it out right now. So, last bit. The other thing we talked about a lot with, putting our game on the web and building our game out of the web was that things like, your social functions, your guild stuff, that could all potentially be just in a web page because, well, in the game it already was in a web page. And, we haven't shown a lot of that outside, but it's time. So, as of right now, the in-game chat's been up for a long time as something you could connect to with a client like Trillion or Pigeon, in addition to connecting to it from the client if you were in the internal test tier. And that same internal tester chat and all the chat server is, as of right now, online on our website. Currently, it is restricted only to internal testers, but we're going, after they've shaken that down, we're going to be opening that to our entire backer community very shortly. So, and again, the thing that is on our webpage is not, it's not some special thing. It's the in-game chat, literally same code. And more things we're going to be rolling out over the next year to be usable in and out of the game, just like that. So come say hi. And Bryce and I will be taking questions, and I think that's going to be in the Twitch chat if you want to talk to us about it. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.